Hi, welcome to the Healing Grief podcast. This is Cassandra, and today we have a very special guest. I met her. She was actually my creative director at my last industry job. Her name's Krisztianna. She's an award-winning multidisciplinary artist based in Southern California. And I wanted to talk to her because unfortunately, while we were working together, she lost her mother, and we had talked about my own mother and stuff. And then I'm really fascinated with her work. She's an amazing artist. She's known for her muralitas. Is that how you say it?
I call them huertitas, but I'll take any
Yes.
pronunciation you can give.
And really want to talk to her about creativity and kind of getting through grief through creativity and how losing her mom and then her dad very close after has informed that grief. So, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here and being open to discussing this with me.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love that you're doing this. I think we need this very much.
Yeah, I hope it helps people because grief is always something for me that was hidden in the shadows and I really believe whatever is brought to the light can be healed. And nothing can be healed if it's in the dark.
As my therapist says, what can be shared can be bared. If you can speak on it,
Mm,
then you can heal on it.
yeah, I love the way they put that. So to start, what was it like for your parents to immigrate from Hungary? That's where you came from, correct? Were you born and
Yeah,
raised
well,
there?
I was born here, and my parents came over at different times. My mother came over when she was 9 with her parents.
Oh.
And my father came over after the 1956 revolution. He was one of the freedom fighters. So
Mm.
they had a target out for him. It was kill on sight. So he had
Oh,
to leave
wow.
with his then wife, well, then fiance. I believe they got a little bit married there and then like more marriage out here. Then my father came out to California. My mother was in New Jersey with her parents. And then my mom was here before him. She grew up in New Jersey around a Hungarian community, the refugee community that they had there. And then when he came over to California, he joined Hungarian Scouts. And then my mom was in California when she was older, and that's where they met. They were both divorced at the time, and then they met in California.
Oh, and then
And then
you
I
came
was born
home.
in California.
What was that? What was that like growing up with them? And did they speak Hungarian to you and
Yes,
it's
yes,
still
it
their
was.
culture?
Yeah, it was Hungary in the house and America outside of the house.
Oh,
I was
oh,
raised on Hungarian black and white films that they imported from Hungary. Was very
wow.
sheltered. At the
Oh.
time, it was a struggle to be so sheltered, but I'm grateful for it now because I think it really informs a lot of my artistry.
And were you an only child with them?
Between the two of them, yes, but we have a bit of a patchwork family. So when I was born, I inherited all these brothers and sisters. Um,
Mm.
they took a little bit to warm up to me, I think, but it helps when you're a cute little baby.
Yeah,
I won them
always.
over.
So what was your mom and dad's life like in California with you? What were some of your memories and how did they?
Oh, I had a really, really good childhood. My mom decided to be a stay-at-home parent, and so she gave up her dreams of becoming a museum curator. Isn't that interesting? And then I ended
Oh,
up becoming an
wow.
artist. I know. And she was an artist as well. So I have many memories of her doing her wood burning art on the carpet on these giant wooden panels and me just kind of like puttering around. And then my dad was an iron worker and a blacksmith, and he had his own company in Ojai. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
little village, and my dad's business. So he started his own company. I was very lucky. Uh, my siblings raised my parents so that I could have the parents that I did. So
Oh.
by the time I came around, my dad decided that he wanted to be a very involved parent. He changed everything so that his work was secondary to family. So I have my siblings to thank for that because he wasn't that way before, and he
Mm-hmm.
had a bit of a heavy hand, and they definitely changed that. So thank goodness for older siblings. So I got the soft version of both of my parents and the very attentive version of both of my parents. We would he'd be nearby and I'd see him every night, and he would teach me bow hunting in the backyard and on the weekends, and he'd do Sunday breakfast. He'd cook his famous eggs and bacon. Yeah, so I had both of my parents very involved in my well-being and making sure that I had all kinds of things to do.
Your mom was an artist, right?
Yes,
Did you?
I call her an artist. She
Yeah.
never called herself an artist, oddly,
Hmm.
but she was always making art.
And that's where your love of art came from.
I think it came from both of my parents. My dad was an artisan. So even though he didn't paint and draw in the classical sense, he worked with a lot of artists to fabricate their visions. And
Mm.
so he was working with artists often. And he himself would come up with plans and designs and draw them as well. He had an artistic soul. And I think my mom and him connected on that.
Mm.
And my mom was definitely more of the traditional artist. Even though she didn't call herself that, everybody else saw her as that. So she was constantly creating, she was painting, she was wood burning, she was drawing. And as I grew to show interest in it, she'd roll out the butcher paper on the kitchen table. She'd
Mm.
be like, draw me these pictures you're seeing in your head. Cause I'd be like, blah, 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 and then this and then that. And then so we would draw for hours. And she was very happy to have a child who would sit at a table could
Aw.
draw for hours. She really appreciated that about me. She told me that multiple times. She said, I could leave you at the table for hours and you would just draw. So she just kept the markers and the paper coming. So she encouraged it at every step of the way.
And that's so cool. I didn't realize that your father was kind of a maker too. And so that leads into what inspired you to create your, can you pronounce it correctly? Your
Oh,
mer,
my muertitas.
yeah,
Well,
because that's fabrication and paint, correct? It's like very it's
yeah,
sculptural, but it's also paint.
this is one of the reasons why I always enjoy talking to you. You take something and you make the connections, and now it's suddenly so obvious. And I never put the two together
No
until
way. No
now.
way.
And you do that all the time. Wow. That's wild. I'm gonna percolate on that. Thank you for that perspective. I like that a lot. Yes, let's go with that.
Yeah. But it's
You're
like
right.
what started that concept? Because it's kind of based on Dia de los Muertos, correct?
Yes. So
The Day of the
I
Dead.
grew up in Ojai, which has a pretty strong community from Michoacan, Mexico. So not all
Mhm.
of Mexico celebrates Dia de los Muertos, but I just happened to be surrounded by people who did celebrate it. And my husband, who I'm married to now, he was born in Michoacan and he came over when he was 5. So we became best friends in Ojai. And so I was just surrounded by it. And when you're little, you just kind of absorb everything. And as you
Mhm.
grow, you start to learn more about where these inspirations come from. And so now when I'm making my Day of the Dead sculptures, I seek to keep being informed because I have to be very delicate in my position
Mm.
because as an obviously Eastern European, it's not my culture, and my husband is not my ticket into it.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't mean I get to partake. So I have to constantly be mindful and careful that I am listening to the community and giving back to the community in some way. But Dia de los Muertos inspires me deeply. It really helped me deal with a lot of grief because my parents, because of their circumstances, I don't think they ever let themselves grieve because of their immigrant experiences, because of the war. I think my father, especially because of the experience he had in the revolution, he had such deep wounds that he never allowed himself to grieve, and he carried that
Mm.
with him
Mm.
until his death. So to be surrounded by a culture that celebrated the lives of those who had passed, where you remember them in joy, you bring them gifts of the things that they would like, and you keep them like alive and present in your heart and you talk about them. That was
Mm.
not something that we did in our house.
Mm.
for the way that I grieve and the way that I heal, it really helped me. Um, so I really attracted to it. And of course, the visuals and the art and the calaveras and the sugar skulls and the whole idea of the time of year when it's autumn and everything is starting to become more internal. You have the one hand, you have the harvest, and the other hand, the leaves are falling. And it's just a very seasonal, beautiful time to come together. And I really, really attracted to it. So it kind of enmeshed itself into my brain and my heart. And the Muertitas are characters from a story that I haven't published yet. It was just something, I'm still working on it. It's not quite right. But I hope to publish it in the next couple of years. Turns out I'm not a very good writer. So I have a very steep learning curve when it comes to that. I might just do a visual graphic novel with no words, just completely pictures at this point, because the words are hard. That's why I pictures, you know?
Yeah.
But I had sculpted one of the characters, one of these muertitas, and they took off. People were really connected with them. I do other things too. I do my paintings. I do like cute little caricatures. I do little unikitties. I do mermaids.
Mhm.
And for some reason, that really resonated with people because in the book, they represent remembering those we have lost and healing through trauma. So I
Mhm.
think people really connected with that, even without understanding why I was making them. And I've met some pretty amazing people, and I've had some really great experiences because of those sculptures.
And you mentioned grief wasn't talked about in your family. What are the Hungarian thoughts and customs around grief and loss? Did they
There's
ever?
there's actually a lot, but we didn't practice them, and I think it's because the grief was so tender and so raw
Mm.
always that you don't talk about the people you lost, you don't talk about the things that hurt you, you just focus on the positive and plow through and move on, even though it's a good way to get through a lot of things, but it doesn't allow you to heal.
Right. It
And
bubbles up too, like it
it
comes out in
oh
other
boy.
ways. That's what I learned
Yeah,
myself in my own life.
yeah, yeah, we've had some really, really amazing conversations, and I've really appreciated how ready you are to have those honest conversations. I think it's
Mhm.
always needed.
Yeah. And for selfish reasons, I get to talk about my mom. I love talking about her. And, and I find people used to get sad, when I talk about her. Now it's starting to not be that way because it's out of joy. I talk about her out of joy, not out of sadness. It's out of remembrance.
And then we get to hold them close that way. They don't feel so far away.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because if you don't talk about them, the memories go away. They fade.
Yeah,
They
it's
don't-
just a big gaping hole of grief.
yeah. Yeah.
You
And
try to ignore.
yeah. Another reason I wanted to create this podcast was so people can learn about their people and then there's a memory, forever online of these people, and other people can learn about them. Because another thing, if someone dies, the new people in your life, they can't meet them, they won't get to know them. And that's something that, comes up all the time.
Yeah, I'm grateful that my husband knew them because he and I grew up together in the same town. So he had to go through his own grief, even though they were my parents. He had known them so well that
Hmm.
he had his own grief to travel through.
Yeah, you can talk about them together, and that helps to keep the memory alive, I've noticed.
It does.
The more you talk.
It's so strange to think of all the ways in which I'm lucky in these ways. It's a weird thing to say that I feel grateful
Mhm.
for those things.
Now the hard part. So your mom died in 2020, and when did your dad die? It was
6 months later.
wow. I can't remember if it was that close. Was it sudden? Were they still married when that happened?
So they were still married. Um, I'll see if I can consolidate this in as short as possible because it was a lot of events.
Mm-hmm.
My mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast and lymph cancer.
Mm-hmm.
The last 9 months of her life, she came to live with us on hospice. So she was living with me and my husband, and at the time, my 3.5 and 4 child as this progressed. And my father went to go live with my sister because his prostate cancer, which is very slow growing, ended up growing quite a lot. to the point where it took him over.
Mm.
And he was on hospice at my sister's.
Oh.
We were both taking care of our ailing parents. Um, and their path, well, at the time, my father was not yet on hospice, but my sister was taking care of him because he had become quite immobile. And he was doing treatment, and he had been doing well, we thought, with my sister taking good care of him. And then my mother, she got worse and worse. Her body did, but she was a fighter. Her spirit was strong. And she, at the time, her denial of what she was going through caused a lot of struggle in our family,
Mm.
and for me as well. But we recognized that she really needed to just ignore what was happening and focus on what made her happy. And so we did that in support of her. And so we didn't talk about it.
Mm.
That's what she wanted. It was hard for her when the hospice nurse came every day and we had to talk about it. But when doctors would look at her chart and see her, they wouldn't have known that
Wow.
she was so far along in her fight, because she looked so amazing and vibrant and chatty and sparkly, with all her jewelry and her bangles clinging around her like little fairies, ringing their bells. Wherever she went, she was just all a flutter and all a chitter chatter.
Mm.
So it was good for her. It's what she needed. Um, and then when my mother passed, it was very hard for my father at that point. He had really declined, and COVID hit, and he became immunocompromised, and he passed quickly after that.
Mm. Yeah, what was that like living with her and not being able to talk about it? Were
It
you
was,
seeking therapy or
at
yeah,
the
'cause
time, no, because I didn't have time. I was working, I was taking care of the kiddo, and I was taking care of my mom. I was changing 2 sets of diapers and
wow.
working. So I didn't know how I could make the time. But I did get therapy after, and that helped
Yeah,
me a lot because my grief was bleeding on the people that didn't cut me. So I
right.
really needed that help, and it did help me.
And was it hard to pretend like nothing? I mean, I'm sure you couldn't pretend, like
Oh
just
gosh.
be positive for her, you know? Like I couldn't imagine trying to be up la la
Um,
la.
yeah, it was really hard, but I think it was even harder for my mom.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, I figured that was the least I could do for her. Like, if it's a dying wish to pretend that you're not dying, like Don Quixote style.
Mm.
My sister made a really good point like that. She's like, Don Quixote, do we really need to tell her that it's windmills and not dragons?
Mm. Yeah, give her that
So we
peace.
agreed. They're dragons.
Oh, wow. And then how did your art practice change after their deaths? Did it help you I remember you were
Yes.
doing really like kind of grief-inspired pieces of sadness and just on black paper a lot with like touches of color. And I just remember you doing that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I love how you pay attention to things. Um, yeah, that's I just everything was black and gold and focusing on where the light touches the surface and trying to discover that, how to present that visually. And it really helped me work through a lot of the grief. I can't explain how it works. Art's always been a part of my life, so it's always been something that helps me work through things. So it only felt natural to keep doing art. And the art changed. And I think I discovered a lot of cool techniques from it. Fell in love with copper foil, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and it really did help me because I'd have a feeling in my heart, and it would usually that's what I call it, in my heart, because that's where it feels like it sits in my body. That's usually where my grief sits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
good for us to think about, when I'm grieving, where do I feel that? Do I feel it in my throat, in my head, in my neck? And for me, it's always my chest and my heart. So I kind of sit with it, and then I create art from that. And that definitely helped alleviate the weight of it.
Why do you think that is? Like, because the art therapy is a big thing. Why do you think that is that art helps heal the heart so much?
I think about this a lot, and I think it's because we are intrinsically creative creatures. When we
Mm,
create, we feel better because of something in the way our bodies and our minds work. We love to make things, we love to create things. We also love to look at the things that other people create. We love to ingest the things that other people create: photography, film, music, dance. We love to partake in other people's creative practice. So there's something that is part of being human that is intrinsically creative. And so when we act in a creative way, helps us heal because it feels very much like a natural thing.
mm. And maybe it's a release, and then you create something tangible where you can actually see what you're feeling and put
Yeah,
it on paper. And I saw you did an art show to exhibit your mom's works. What was that experience like?
that was that was wonderful. I have a tendency to sink my teeth into things and people, and I love hard and fierce, and I don't let go. So that was really helpful in me giving her a send off
Mm,
because letting go is hard. I'm not the kind of person to just let go, you know?
mhm. Well, you shouldn't. I mean, I don't think we should have to let go of someone
Um,
we love so
uh,
much.
the hospice nurse said when my mom was having, when she was ready to go, there's a process the body goes through, and the hospice nurses start to recognize it. And she says the process of her passing will be easier on her if she knows that you let her go. I was
Mhm.
like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah,
She
no.
can, she can take her time.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that's what a good person will do. You just
Yeah.
you just met a petty mother effer, so no, I'm gonna fight the dying of the light. But it was very hard for my mom in the end, and I thank our hospice workers for everything they do and the incredible drugs they can give us to help that smooth transition. I saw my grandfather pass from Alzheimer's when I was 18 in our home, and he didn't have medical assistance,
Mm,
and it was a very brutal passing. It's like reverse birth, and
mm,
the body goes through its own labor pains as it lets go of the soul or whatever you want to call it. And so I was afraid that my mother would have to experience that in her body because she was holding him while he went through that because she was his caregiver.
mm,
And so I'm so grateful for morphine.
mm,
And I say that lightly now, but it was a very difficult decision because my mother was very holistic, very anti-doctor, very anti-medicine, because and she had a series of experiences to validate that experience for her. So it's
right.
not necessarily something I would disagree with her on because of her personal experiences and her life experiences and being a woman in the 1950s. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
um, she had a very different relationship with medicine, and so it was a big deal when she decided that she did want morphine. And in the end she was very grateful for it, as were we,
Mm.
because cancer is very painful.
And so the art show, you said she never exhibited her own work. So what was that like being able to show her stuff and how did people react to it? That's an amazing way to honor her and then show her soul through her work. That's so cool.
Thank you for bringing it back around. I went off on a tangent. uh
Yeah. It's
that
hard.
was it. Well, yeah, because of the whole letting go thing. You ask good
Yeah.
questions, girl. Like, I gotta need to dig deep there. um and thank you for that. That wasn't a complaint. That was gratitude for that show, in allowing myself to let her go and seeing all these people react to her work. And yeah, she'd never had an art show. She'd had exhibits at like a gem fair where she would sell her jewelry, and then she'd like put up one of her angels, and she's like, yeah, just in case somebody likes it. And that was
Oh.
what she painted the most, was angels. um
Oh.
that was what she loved the most. She collected books of angels. She knew everything there was to know about angels from historical perspective, from different religions, and it was her interest. And so this art show was mostly angels, wood burned with gold and wood stain, and they just filled this space in this local Camarillo art exhibit area we have. And seeing people's reactions was wonderful, and it felt very validating of her work. And it was all her favorite pieces, because people have bought her work throughout her lifetime. But what was left after she passed was sitting in my garage. Our house can't fit these beautiful things on our walls. And honestly, for me, it hurt too much to look at them, because I grew up with her painting these things.
Mm.
And I thought these need to be seen by the world, but it didn't feel right to sell them and me get the money. So what we decided to do was the money would be split between 3 organizations: the hospice that took care of her, the Hungarian Scouts that she was a part of, and the Camarillo healing rooms. We have a community here that prays over people who need healing.
Oh,
And she
wow.
was definitely deeply interested in that. And so she would go weekly and they would pray over her. And it really helped her, really helped keep her spirits up.
Wow.
And so we donated to them as well. And all the paintings sold,
Wow.
every single one.
That's beautiful. Now she's living as an angel kind of in other people's houses.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. She painted angels all her life. And I'm like, how you like being one now, Mom?
I know, I was gonna say, did she even talk about, I mean, I know you said she was trying to pretend it wasn't happening, but did she have any thoughts about the
Yeah, she
afterlife?
talked about the afterlife a lot, but not in context to her.
What did
So
she
that's how
think
she kept it
happened?
separate.
Like, what did she think was on the other side of the
Well,
transition?
that was where a lot of her struggle came from, was she
Mm.
really, really wanted to know what would be waiting for her, but she didn't voice it that particular way. She wanted to know where her parents went when they passed. She wanted to have answers. And so she would read whatever she could get her hands on. Near-death experiences was something she was very interested in and read a lot about. And she just wanted answers. And now she knows.
Hmm. And what about your dad? Did he ever talk about
Yeah,
afterlife
he
or
was he
death?
was much more open about death. He grew up on a farm, and
Mm.
as he grew up in an environment where death was very much a part of life. But my mother was very sensitive to it. And then after the Hungarian Revolution, he could talk about death, but not the people that he lost.
That's
So
very traumatizing. Not only you should lose your friends and then your whole country having to
yeah,
leave.
it was
It's a
very
different
hard
kind
for
of
him.
grief, grieving your whole
Yes.
life. Have you seen signs of them since they passed? Have you seen?
Oh my gosh. So the simple answer is yes. Can I wax poetic on this?
Yes, please. This is my favorite kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh. So before they passed, I, and this might shock a couple of my family members that I might send this to after, but I did not believe in what comes after. I
Mm.
knew that I didn't know, and I knew that nobody else knew, and that we had ideas, and that at the time I accepted that it could be a nothing. But after my parents passed, after both of them passed, I experienced shiny people standing in my kitchen that I could walk around and look at. I
Shiny people.
experienced them sitting at my table. I experienced um, arms hugging me.
Wow. Shiny people like a spirit? Like you what do you mean a shiny
I
person?
either my brain broke from the grief, which I accept that as an option. I might be a
Oh.
little crazy, and I'm okay with that because it brings me comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But I have experienced it's like a halo, like an outline, and it looks
Mm.
like you're looking through shimmering water, like light, and everything behind it warps.
Wow.
And um, they're usually the size or the width of either my mother, my father, or my grandmother. I remember when we were talking about your mom, you were telling me how you were constantly seeing signs and numbers that she loved, and and the symbols of things that she loved, like the butterfly and things like that. And I thought that was so amazing and so incredible. And I believed that whatever you're experiencing is real. That didn't mean that I didn't believe you.
Mm.
That just meant, oh, that's not something I'll ever experience. And then after my parents passed,
Mm.
I was experiencing those things. I was experiencing every time I looked at the clock, it was double numbers. Anywhere I looked, it was when my parents decided to marry and have me, because I was a bit of a whoops, I was like, oh my. They were two divorced people, having a good time. They weren't expecting me.
Yeah.
And
Oops, oh my.
yeah, whoops. Um, and so when they decided to get together and have a life together, two white butterflies came and danced around them multiple times. And when I tell you, I'm seeing two white butterflies constantly dancing around, and I don't know if Camarillo suddenly had like a boom of these white butterflies, but they're always out and about. I see the shiny people, I get hugs.
Mm.
Um, I'm feeling very loved and watched over, and I'm trying to accept it and absorb it because at the time it didn't align with something that I believed. And so now I know nothing. And that there's something wonderful happening around me right now, and I have to really be grateful to it and open to
Wow, that's amazing.
it.
And that's crazy about the
it
white butterflies.
so I believe in guardian angels. I believe in ancestors watching over us.
Hmm.
100%.
Yep.
Yep.
Wow. Wow, I've never seen the shiny people, but first time I ever meditated in college, I felt a hug.
How
The
did it
first
feel?
time. It was
How did
crazy.
it
And I told the whole class. I felt it. I think I was like, I think my mom just hugged me. And like I just told the whole class and it was just like I just felt it. I just felt warm. It was like arms
Yeah.
around me. And
Yeah.
it was my mom. I was like just came in my head and I had no doubts about it at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
The same thing. For me, it was my mom's arm on one side and my dad's arm on the other.
Wow.
And I could feel the heat. I could feel the pressure. And I was like, I'm looking around. And man, I felt a little crazy.
I know you do. You do. Like to this day I say things and I'm like, yeah, my mom sends me songs, but that's
Yeah,
just
I believe it.
yeah. It's how they're we're still here. Their body gave out, but their spirit is alive and well.
Yeah. It's an incredible experience.
Yeah. So really you don't need to let go. It's letting go of that old, vision of them. And
Yeah.
now you have a new relationship with them, which is so
As usual, you are amazing. Yes.
well, I have a lot
Beautifully
of
put. And I'm going to
experience.
take that with me.
Yeah. I mean,
I
yeah.
love that. Oh my God. I'm going to tell my husband about that tonight
Aw,
because I think that'll help him too.
aw, it's
So
good.
thank you.
You're very welcome. And I want to talk to you. I looked at your most recent works and I saw one of them, Flowers of the Grave, was based on your mother. And then is it agate? Is Agus? Is that how you pronounce
I
it?
don't know how to pronounce it, but I always pronounced it Aegis.
Aegis of
Um,
Medusa? And that was based
yeah,
on healing and trauma. Can you tell me about that?
yeah, yeah, sure. So the first series you were talking about, Flowers of the Grave, I did a series of self-portraits where I was wearing my mother's jewelry because she was very
Oh,
into jewelry. She left me a lot of it. And these portraits are in the style of Day of the Dead. And I use copper foil around my portrait and kind of like a halo. And the whole idea is remembering her through her love of flowers. So each portrait is a different flower that she loved. She loved many flowers, but I kind of picked the top four, and her jewelry. And it was just a more practice in accepting and healing and remembering her and remembering the things that she loved and celebrating the things that she loved, all the shiny, pretty things. In one of them, I'm wearing a scarf as well. And she was famous for every Christmas, everybody would get scarves, and that's one of the scarves. So I think anytime I put time and energy into celebrating the things that she loved, it helps heal me because I remember her,
Mm-hmm.
remember the good things. And then Aegis of Medusa was definitely something very personal. So it has to do with overcoming my own traumas as a woman, as I really associate with Medusa's symbolism and overcoming things that might have happened to you that shouldn't have and that you're not responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just a very powerful figure. But I was always so sad that she's beheaded and then that's it. She's put, so the Aegis is what I think the goddess Athena, goddess of war, she took Medusa's head and put it on her shield. And the Aegis is a protective medallion, a protective symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to sculpt a new Aegis, kind of reinventing her story, because when she was beheaded, that's the story goes, Pegasus was born from her blood. I mean, that's freaking cool. You bleed and a winged horse comes out. So I thought, what if she heals herself? I have a amethyst geode at her heart. I've got wings coming out of her neck. And if you look closely where the neckline is, where she's supposedly, quote unquote, beheaded, she's healing and it's being knit together with feathers and veins. And she
Mm-hmm.
has a very peaceful look on her face because if she wanted to, she would, but she doesn't have to. So, and her snakes are chilling too because there's nothing wrong right now. She's healing, she's safe, and she's looking after other people and protecting whatever space she's in. And a local piercing shop has her displayed right now, and so she gets to overlook everybody.
That's so cool. How can other people be creative? Let's say they're not creative and they're not an artist. What can they do to kind of tap into creativity to help heal trauma or
First of all, I 100% believe everybody is creative. I think if somebody feels like they're not creative, it's because somebody told them that and they believe
mm,
them. And
mm.
then whoever told you that, they can like step aside and you don't have to carry that anymore. You can put that down. Easy to say. I have to practice putting it down every day. um, but I'd say the easiest thing is find something that keeps your hands creating something. Maybe your thing is clay and you don't know because you've never had clay in your hands before. Maybe your thing is sketching, but you've never really tried because you've only been around ballpoint pens. You've never had pencils in your hand before. Maybe you love all these things, but you're just nervous about starting because you're worried somebody's going to come up and laugh at you. That's usually the most common thing that stops people is they don't want to be ridiculed or laughed at for something that they're practicing that's so personal. So I would recommend keep a secret art thing somewhere. Have a secret sketchbook that you don't share with anybody. You just draw it for yourself. Go to an art store and just get the cheapest of whatever materials you've never tried before, because the quality of the materials isn't nearly as important as practicing.
Mhm.
And the more you muck around with the clay and the more you sketch and doodle with pens or crayons or whatever you have, you start to find what makes you happy. And we're all intrinsically creative. And I just believe that if you don't think you're a creative person, is you've never had the opportunity to hold the thing that excites you in your hand. Because when you find it, you'll make stuff. And then when people don't like it, that's fine. People are allowed not to like things. I have very polarizing art. I have been at an art show where somebody who didn't know I was the artist just straight up said, I would buy this so that I could burn it. This is awful. And that doesn't make me stop creating. I say, well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I get to
Yeah.
ponder maybe why they felt that way, but they're allowed that.
Mhm.
So it's okay when people don't like what you make. It doesn't matter.
Sometimes it's just about the process, not the end result, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And okay, so the last question before we get to the questions is what advice would you give someone who is grieving now?
First, I want to acknowledge that grieving is different for everyone. And so I'll tell you what I would have told myself. That way, if somebody grieves like me, then then it'll ring true for them. Um, I would say let the feelings come. Just let them come. Don't fight them. And when the feeling passes, the very first thing that you look at or see that makes you feel happy, that makes you feel joy, it could be the way the steam comes out of your coffee cup. Give your stinky little kitty. Catalog those things. All those little things that make you happy when you come out of the grief, when you finally surface. Catalog those things, either mentally or in a journal. And it'll start to rewrite those pathways and it'll be easier to get out.
Mm.
And when you can find your way out, it's easier to ask for help.
Beautiful advice. Okay, and now for on my podcast, when we're discussing people have passed, I have a list of questions that I like to ask to kind of let people get to know them and let you talk about them. And now you'll have a record, and whoever listens to it will get to know them too. And what were their names? I forgot to ask in the beginning.
Arpad, or I'll say it in Hungarian, Arpad Echedi and
Mhm.
Yudit Echedi.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I wasn't even gonna try to say their names. So what's your favorite memory of them?
um, for some reason, my mom shouting at my dad to pick up the dog poop in the backyard because it was a beautiful day and he was home and he had been ribbing her and she just needed some help. And for some reason, there was just something so peaceful about that moment. There was a lot of dog poop in the back. My mother is turning in her urn right now. She's like, pick something pretty. I'll give you a second one. Um, Easter, when we're all in the backyard and everybody was dressed nice and we found all the eggs in the backyard. I think that'll make my mom happy. That one.
Oh. See, you're hearing her. I hear my mom in the back of my
Absolutely.
head too.
Absolutely. Yes. And I
Yeah.
love it. I
Yeah,
love
that's
it.
great. Are there any songs that remind you of them?
So my dad loved to sing. It was one of
Mm.
his most favorite things. As he was passing, we had a type of wake where a bunch of Hungarians came together and sang his favorite songs outside of his window. It was during COVID, so we couldn't go in. And so he was in his hospice bed with everybody singing to him, and we sang him all his favorite songs that he was famous for. And the one that comes to mind right now is tis a silly song, and it's called Cactus Pedro, and it's just a silly know nothing song about a cowboy, but it's all in Hungarian,
Mm-hmm.
and it's totally absurdist and right up his alley. And he would just belt it out, the smell of wine coming off his breath and his big beard and his big voice just resounding over whatever atmosphere he happened to be singing into.
Oh, I love it. What was their most notable feature?
My mother, it was her smile. People would always attract to her smile. You leave her in a room full of strangers for 15 minutes and she has that many friends when you come pick her up. It's definitely her energy. And then for my dad, it was his hands. He had really strong hands, iron worker's hands. And they were always very, very tanned from the sun, almost reddish from the amount of sun they would get. And he was always around heat and iron and welding and sparks and flame. So the tops of his knuckles, the hair on his knuckles was always singed off and prickly.
Oh, that's neat. Are there any hobbies or traditions you continued for them?
Yes, I like to make my mother a coffee and just leave it out for her.
Aw, that's cute.
And then for my dad, we used to drink wine together over Zoom because he lived in Desert Hot Springs. And every Friday night we'd get together and we'd drink wine and bullshit over whatever. And so whenever I drink wine, which isn't as often these days because he was my buddy, a drinking buddy, I always pour a little bit out for him.
Oh. Did they have any funny sayings?
My dad had many, but I will leave you with not as you should be horribilibe, which means this too is just a storm in the toilet. In other words, pay it no mind.
Hilarious.
You're welcome.
Oh man, they sound like characters. Funny.
Yeah.
Are there any mementos or precious objects you have of theirs?
Yeah. Not ones that my mom would particularly like. My mom loved beautiful things, thoughtful things. She was a creature of high-mindedness and talking about life. But my favorite thing is a mug that I would make her coffee in every day as the cancer took her. And it's my favorite thing.
Hmm. What important lessons did they teach you?
A lot. Let me pick my top two. If you love yourself, you'll always have one person who loves you.
Hmm.
And ez is vihar a bilibe. Let it go.
Aw.
Let it go.
Hmm. Can you describe them in one word?
I'm gonna hyphenate it. So it's one word. Fearsome love.
Oh, love that. What do you want us to know about them?
To not be sad for them, to celebrate.
Hmm.
But that's
And
hard.
yeah, I know. And what is your message for them now?
I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm doing my best here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I miss them. And I'm very angry they left as soon as they did. And I'm not going to let them live it down.
Aw.
And they can just wait till I get over there. I'm going to
Yeah.
give them an earful.
Tell them to come down and yell at you. Oh, thank you so much for doing this. And how can people find you? Find your beautiful, beautiful, amazing art.
Well, if they feel like listening to how to spell my name, they can go to Krisztianna.com, and it's the Hungarian way of spelling it. So I'm going to spell it out for them right now. It's Kris, as in Sam, Z as in zebra, T as in Tom, IANNA.com.
Yeah, of course, I'll add a link in the
Thank
show
you.
notes and all
Yeah,
that
it's
good
really hard to
stuff.
spell my name.
Yeah, but it's such a beautiful name. I always loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. A long time ago, I decided the world will learn how to spell my name, and it just made it harder to find me on the internet. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
And
thank you.
thank you so much for this podcast. I cannot express it enough how important it is that you've created this space. So thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you for being open to being here. I really, when I started it, you were one of the first people that popped in my head because just the bridge of creativity and healing and then I witnessed, you losing your mother. So, and I remember we would talk about it a lot. And I have your beautiful sheet. I didn't say this yet, but Krisztianna made a beautiful portrait of my mother for me that I have sitting right by my desk.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you for
so
the
much.
opportunity. And I want everyone to know that you paid me for it fair and square.
Yes, I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
because yeah,
I
I
would have
love
done it
it.
for free, but you were a stand for supporting art, and that's just part of what you do. So
Yes,
thank you.
yes. Art's everything, and I really hope people are inspired by this podcast and they pick up any medium. Just feel your feelings, put them on paper, do something. Just
Yeah, I'm actually considering doing a series exactly about that, just for free on YouTube.
perfect. I was gonna
Um,
say you should not. I don't like telling people what to do, but it'd be really cool for you to, have something to show people because you were so warm and nurturing when you were my creative director, and it
oh, thank
really
you. Well, you
helps.
happen to be a
Yeah.
good soul. Not everybody has that experience of me. I need you to know that.
Oh,
Not
well,
everybody
I did.
experiences the warm Krisztianna.
Yeah, I know, and I'm
Yeah,
very
because
glad.
you're awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad we're, still friends and keep in touch. And
Me too.
thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank you all for listening and remember forever.